if your stories do not make your people come alive, and then, have that their own volition to drive forward and action that story, to purpose that story, to make things come together, then you are leaving a tremendous amount of power on the table,
Mm.
and you're leaving things to chance. The better your stories are, the more you are able to structure the response of your people and your organizations.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we've got Kurian Tharakan. He's a legendary storyteller, author. His book, 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. I just got done reading it. It's a book that you can read, leave it on your desk and pick it up at any time. It's got great short stories you can go through and really understand. He's a legendary leader, and he does that through telling great stories and parables that each person can relate to. Let's welcome Curry into the show. I often get a chance to spend some time with thought leaders like yourself. I find it amazing, and yours is special in that through storytelling, you really create the big idea, really help organizations through and see it in ways that people can remember and make it palpable, right? I mean, I find that really amazing.
Yeah. So story is the only way we understand our world. You can say about facts, you can talk about, details of various kinds, but until those details come alive, those facts come alive in the way of story, it doesn't have meaning. So any one particular fact can have several different meanings depending on the lens that you use to tell the story around that particular fact or detail, right? So you really need to be specific as a leader about the story that you want the audience to remember in their heads after they leave your presence, so they can act on that without you having to watch them do it.
I'd even venture to say that story is what really created what makes us different, right? Why human beings, why Homo sapiens are so different. When you read books like Yuval Harari's *Sapiens* book, he really talks about how when we become storytellers, right? The storyteller really is what grew our society, what really has our society grow and be able to communicate to each other in ways that we can see what we're looking to do together, right? And through multiple stories, and some of them fiction, some of them nonfiction, we've grown everything we have through these stories.
Story is the central part of how cumulative knowledge takes place. And so, whenever we learn something, unless we can apply it through some kind of a narrative mentally, you can't action it physically.
That's right.
So, everything belongs, there's at least 2 points of creation for everything. It's got to be mental first, right? Hopefully, it's also emotionally embedded, which is what the true power of story is. Not only to give a framework for meaning, but then to emotionally embed it, so it comes alive in people's minds, and then they can act upon it. Put it into action and affect that story for the organization, for themselves, for you as your lead, as the leader.
I mean, that emotional embedment, right? Let's talk about that, right? Because that right there, I think is key. Without, without the emotional embedment, it sounds like the Peanuts teachers. Remember the wah, wah, wah,
Wah,
wah,
wah,
wah,
wah.
right?
Yeah,
It sounds
exactly.
like
Yeah.
that. All of a sudden, you get a little bit of emotional attachment to it, a little bit of a kick to, and it starts to come alive, right? I can start to feel this, and in that becomes this. There's some great studies showing that that's really where I remember. That's really where I take it to value. When you leave the room, I still can do what you're asking me to do.
The truth must be felt before it can be found.
Ooh, that's a good one. The truth must be felt before it can be found. That's a great place to go.
That's everything it is. So, if your stories do not make your people come alive, and then, have that their own volition to drive forward and action that story, to purpose that story, to make things come together, then you are leaving a tremendous amount of power on the table,
Mm.
and you're leaving things to chance. The better your stories are, the more you are able to structure the response of your people and your organizations.
And I think that that's when you talk about the response of your organization, when we start to look at an organization, isn't it really told through their stories, right? Their
Always.
their their history, their culture, their actions, their way of being, right? It's always, I've often said to people, what's the difference between a really rich woman and the Queen of England, right? She's, they both have really fancy houses, but without the story, without the pomp and circumstance, with all the carriages and horses and rituals, without that, it's just another rich woman in a house.
Exactly. And until you really understand the story that's involved, and in fact, one of the clearest things that a director on a movie set will do is provide their actors with a backstory for their character. And without that backstory, it doesn't have the same level of embedment. That's your word now. Embedment in the actor's head as to the motives for why the character is doing what they're doing at this time. But when they have that backstory, then everything comes alive.
That's awesome. The getting a backstory, getting who we are as a company, right? And we're gonna really talk a lot about growing companies and really helping leaders or just even people in a company grow teams, right? If you're a team leader, if you're a project leader, if you're a construction leader, if you're a day school leader, if you can't tell the story, right? If they can't see the story and how through stories we really start to create a way of being for it, which ultimately creates the culture, right?
Creates a culture. And stories don't have to be elaborate stories. They can simply be stories that convey meaning. One of the best stories I recently read was about how a restaurant manager was motivating the busboy. Okay, and this is the 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid, and the kid is supposed to be doing his job, but he's a 14-year-old kid. He's sort of doing it sort of this way and that way. So in order to motivate him, and the motivation is not, the bullwhip going, but it's to install a moral mission. And the moral mission was simply this: Billy, come over here, right? Hey, Billy, you're doing a great job, but we really need to be a little bit more diligent on cleaning that tabletop. Last week, I saw a young mom come here, and she had a little baby with her, no more than 6 months, 9 months, and she had to put it on the tabletop just to balance her before the high chair arrived. Right? That tabletop still had ketchup rings on it, right? And you don't want that. I don't want that, right? So that's why it's so important to make sure that those tables are sparkling clean. And suddenly Billy gets this idea. It's not just about his job, it's about creating a safe, sterile place where that baby can actually be placed upon, right? And nothing is going to happen because he didn't do something about it. So moral
Nice.
mission. So now we take that job and we create something in the way of something bigger than simply bussing the table. Okay, it's now about keeping babies safe.
But you can see it, right? As you're telling the story, you can see the rings on the baby's katukas, right? You
Yeah,
can see
yeah.
you can see it now. You're like, I don't want. Come on, I don't want that, right?
I don't want that. Billy,
Right,
you don't want that. I don't want that, right? And the mom definitely didn't want that. So we really need to keep that baby safe.
engaging that emotional experience through storytelling.
Yeah.
Uh, what are the classic uh, ways of creating the seven stories that people tell that great leaders
Well,
tell?
there's seven basic stories, and the book is called The Seven Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. And
Charismatic.
while not everybody can be charismatic, you can be more charismatic. And charisma's most basic definition is what people become in your presence. Do they become more enlivened? Do they become more energetic, purposeful, meaningful? That they are imbued with a sense of mission as we go forward. And that charisma is your ability to transmit that state of being into your people. Okay, that's what charisma is. It's not about, hey, look how great I am. It's about your ability to make your people come alive. That's what charisma is. So there's seven basic stories on this charisma, the seven, stories in the framework. And they are primal stories. And the way we created them, when I wrote the book in 2020. And we researched what was going on in the great religions of the world. And there was a great marketer by the name of, now it'll come to me in a moment, right? He was one of the first marketers for Apple computers, Steve Jobs, right? And he had a great line, and that was, great marketing takes its cues from great religion. And there's
Mm.
been thousands of religions, in humankind's history over the last, 12,000 years, 5,000 years. Written history is only about 5,000 years old right now. And there's been thousands of religions in that time. But today we have some dominant religions. So we have Christianity, Judaism, we have Islam, and those are all Abrahamic religions, right? But then we also have things like Hinduism, right? Maybe Buddhism, which is more of philosophy, those kind of things. But they all have the same basic 7 stories. Would you like to hear what they are?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
the seven stories. Okay. Very first one is creation origin. How did this all begin? What was the inciting incident? What was the genesis of how it started? And in fact, the opening book in the Bible is Genesis.
Genesis.
That is the book, right? So how did this all begin? Story number 2 is our identity, values, and beliefs. Who are we as people? What do we hold sacred? What must we never violate? And what must we always uphold? Identity, values, and beliefs. Story 3 is the big idea. What is a central organizing principle that binds everything together in one common thread so that we can move forward together, bound together in this big idea? Story number 4 is the enemy we face. And enemies don't have to be people. In Florida, the enemy might be hurricane season.
That's right. That's right.
Right. It might be global warming. It could be a whole bunch of things like that. But now enemies allow us to create polarity in the narrative. And we fight for or we fight against. So here's a fight for. We fight for adult literacy. 100% adult literacy.
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
fight against early childhood mortality.
That's right.
In developing countries, right? So we need something to focus our efforts against. Story number 5 is the mighty winds. And the mighty winds, I say that every business is like a sail ship, and sail ships need wind to power their sails. And now wind in this case is without wind, your sails just stay flat, right? They don't billow forward. And so you need there's 6 basic winds that power your boats, or refuse to power your boats, or power other things that you don't want powered. Because these are independent, they're agnostic, they don't care.
They don't care.
And the six winds are societal winds, technological winds, environmental winds, economic winds, political and legislative winds. Those are the 5, right? So in 1969, there's a little thing that connected 4 universities together called ARPANET. And because it was the Defense Department of the US that funded it, it was often called DARPANET. It quickly became known as the Internet. And eventually, because of the advances in HTML, and the World Wide Web and all that kind of stuff, everybody can access this now. The World Wide Web sits on top of this thing that was founded in 1969 called the Internet. And now we have multi-$100 billion corporations that come as a result. That also create massive wealth for people, create massive productivity for the masses as a whole, and destroy industries in process. No one buys a typewriter anymore.
No.
There is no typewriter industry
No.
anymore, right? Except in nostalgia. And what they do instead is they go to Google Docs and they type it themselves. That's what happens, right? And you can proof it on there, and you can format it on there, and all that kind of stuff. But no one buys a typewriter. I used to type my term papers on a typewriter. Story number 6 is the journey we must undertake. The first 5 stories are the left-hand side of the equation. Okay? And if all those stories are believable, then it is obvious equals this is the journey we must undertake. This is what we're going to do. And finally, story number 7 is the why we will win story. And what the story number 7 is it's called a meta narrative. And it takes the previous 6 stories, puts it into a single telling, makes it short, makes it very digestible. And then it allows people to also see what the win possibility is by injecting what we call keystone elements. And keystone elements guarantee the win. Here's some common keystones: better, superior people, superior God, superior strategy. And you can see these, and there's hundreds of keystones, but you can see those 3, repeated throughout history. You just have to go to the Bible, go to the Quran, right?
That's right.
You'll see
always wanting to be better. So keystone, explain that a little bit more. So keystone people, is that always kind of? Go ahead.
So they're keystones, right? So the keystones are now, the previous 6 stories tell us why and what we need to do.
Yeah.
And now the Keystones guarantee the win. God is with us. The Israelites fought a lot of people because God was with them and he commanded them to do that.
Right.
That's what ended up happening,
Right,
in the
right, right,
Bible.
right. I mean, these are, essentially fictitious story, fictional stories that were created, but were believed. People believed,
That's
and took
right.
on,
But
and they've gone to fight. I mean, massive movements have happened through great storytelling. So they
through
really,
great stories. But massive craziness has happened as well. So you go to
that's right.
David Koresh, down in Waco, Texas, right? You go to Jim Jones down in Guyana, and the power of the storytelling. On CNN, you've got this doomsday cult, right? The UFOs coming, the comets coming, all of that. It's all story guiding every aspect of how they think, what they will do next, and why they will do it. And it's all self-propelled. It's all of their own self-volition. That's the thing with all this kind of stuff, right? So that final story, that meta narrative, one of the things you'll never do is those first 6 stories is tell them in a single telling.
No way.
You'll
No
bore
way.
them senseless, right? But the
Yeah.
meta narrative now is sort of the trailer. It's the movie trailer. This is what's going on. And now, if you want a deeper understanding of this, you're going to come in and listen to these other 6 stories. And the thing about these stories is that you will weave them. You'll have multiple stories in each one of them, multiple creation stories, multiple identity, beliefs, and values stories, right? In the creation story, for example, in Genesis, you will have God creating the universe as a whole, Earth, Eden, all the animals, and then eventually Adam and Eve. But then there's a whole bunch of sub stories in there as well. And the sub stories are things like the fall from grace.
That's right.
Right,
That's right.
all
For
these
sure.
different the snake talking to Eve, and all these sub stories come together and they reinforce the main story. But then all these stories as a whole, the 6 stories, they form what's called a story complex. And so you have adjacent stories reinforcing other adjacent stories, and they reinforce the overall idea as a whole, and everything now feeds off of each other, and you have a very powerful set of narratives that reinforce each other, self-reinforce, and that are allowed to be told in very short, succinct form to bring more people into the tent.
Well,
That's where conversions happen.
right. Well, if they can't see the story, right, and if there isn't some buy into it, if it's a religion or a TV show, or when you watch a TV show, the same thing happens, right? There's narratives that get created and weaved every single week. If you watch, when I was a kid, I watched Friends, right?
Yeah.
There was the characters on Friends. Each part of the character had something I could relate to. There was Ross the nerd, right? And I could relate to a part of that narrative of that. There was Joey the jock. I could kind of relate to Joey the jock. There was Jennifer the flirt, right? There was, right. And there was kind of the pretty one, and there was the goofy one. Each part of that narrative, each part of that story every week kind of pulled me in because I can relate to a part of that, right? As we as leaders start to create stories for our companies, our organizations, our teams, how do we sit down and start to weave that into our team, right? Really start to really create a story that helps them see the vision of what we're looking to do to move forward.
Well, how do we do that? Well, the very first thing, you got to be very clear what your mission is. What is that mission? What was that? What's the whole purpose for being, let alone the mission that you want to, in the way of the specific goals and objectives you want to get to. So those stories have to come alive in the leader's head first before they can translate the aspect of that story that's most relevant to their people.
That's right.
So
That's right.
so there's an aspect of this. So part of what we've got to do for our people, like I have a digital marketing agency as well. We got about 35 people here. Not only, I know what I say is that we work with Shopify merchants. So one of my closing remarks every Friday is that with that, I release you to the 4 winds. Okay? But come back Monday. We have merchants to grow and we have merchants to make successful. And that's the mission. Right. But embedded within that is I also have to create a separate mission to make sure that my people have a future here, that they're growing themselves, that they have accomplishments, that they're being paid well, all those kind of things. And those are all sub stories to help me fulfill the overall story of the company as a whole.
As you talk about digital marketing on the digital marketplace, I'd like to venture off a little bit over to, where you see that's going, right? As we see the world changing and AI coming to marketplace, as we see Chat GBT and the Google platforms and all this new world changing, I'd like to. I know it's a kind of a little deviation for us, but I really like to talk a little bit about where you see and how you're starting to prepare the digital world and the digital marketplace for the next environment.
So, Anthony, I think you're asking me for a narrative.
Oh, that's right. I was. Sorry,
Isn't that interesting,
yeah,
right?
we'll come back here. We'll come back to that.
No, no, no. We can do that right now.
Oh, good. All right, good.
Right? We're going to do that right now. So the narrative. So, when you don't understand the meaning of this, no narrative is present. When you understand the meaning, you have a narrative. It may not be a correct narrative, might not be accurate, but you have a narrative. And so that's how, you have the same set of facts that you have CNN going one way and you have Fox News going another. Right. So that's what ends up happening with those kind of things. We have the Republicans going one way, you got the Democrats going another. So with the AI thing, is AI is going to kill, 30% of the world labor force.
That's right.
Or AI is going to make that 30% even more productive than they were ever before. They're going to take away all the boring parts of things and now get them into even more strategic aspects of the business. I know that's the story I believe. We're going to be even more productive. We use AI left and right now. It's only been 3 months. Now, we were using aspects of AI prior to that, although we didn't really call it that. It's just features of Canva or Google or Netflix and Amazon use AI to do product suggestions, right? But we're using AI quite regularly in our business right now. And I can tell you, I would not trust it ever to replace human judgment.
Mm.
But you should see the productivity gains we've got as a result of being able to turn over a large portion of the writing and this and that. But the writing comes back at a grade 10 level.
Well,
It comes back at a grade 10 level. We still have to apply human judgment to it, and especially our knowledge of the background of all the clients we serve to see how that would apply in a specific situation. That's what would happen.
now, look, I get that. And by today, the AI that we're looking at today is the bag phone of the cellular world originally, right? I mean,
Sure.
I grew up in Florida, and all those Miami Vice guys had bag phones, right? They were
Yeah.
back then, and that bag phone would literally call the tower, open up a phone line, and then it was the first starting of being able to drive around your car and talk. And I would say that the AI that we're going through today is in that realm, right? It's in that realm. It's very basic. I would not trust it yet. I have a Tesla and I drive around, and my son and I let it go and do hands-free driving in the city, and it drives like a 6-year-old.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something I will ever let you cannot let go of that wheel yet. No, it's getting there. It'll get there. Now, what I'm starting to look at is how do we start to prepare our future, right? Those folks that are out there now, continue to be in the digital marketplace as you're starting to look at, look, we're using it for copy. Great. That's an easy one to create and get excited and start to create some copy. But as the world starts to get more and more, the search engine optimization happens with uh, chat. You could almost see it replacing Google at some point, where you go to right now when I go to Google, do a Google search. We're working in the digital marketplace. We're working on trying to be at the top of that tier when the search happens, right? How do I get to be in that first category? If I'm not one of the paid ads, how do I be one of the first in my search
Sure.
engine optimization? Right? We're seeing that kind of definitely transpire. But how, as this translates over to chat, where I started looking at my AI platform as my, hey, find me the perfect widget for this project, and it starts to and I want it to be environmentally friendly. I want it to be available quickly. I need to fit my timelines. As we start to gear and train it, you can see how that Google platform starts changing dramatically,
Yeah,
right?
and Google is seeing this as a huge threat right now, right? So
Huge.
they're and what's interesting is that ChatGPT uses the core engine that Google developed,
Oh,
right? So Google already has the core engine, the artificial intelligence engine, that they released to the public domain, right? At least available to OpenAI, anyways. And so they can quickly get on top here. The problem is, do they destroy their business as a result? Right? If we go
Or change it. I mean,
right, and if you go to a site called Perplexity now,
yeah,
perplexity.ai, that's actually an answer engine. Google's a search engine. Perplexity is an answer engine. It'll give you the answer to the question that you have, and then cite 4 or 5 footnotes behind it. It's a very cool thing. I've got it loaded on my phone right now, and it's replaced my searches for Google. Right now, Google still has its place. I still want to know if I'm searching for products and things like that. I want the full list of products. And yeah, maybe it'll help. But Google all I would not go past the second or third or fourth page in Google anyways for my results.
that's right.
Right. I'm not going to the 10th page usually. So the first or second page. So it's the same thing as Perplexity, but now Perplexity gives me a summation. Right.
Right.
And I can go to the top 4 or 5. But that's exactly the kind of search results that Google was providing to begin with. Now, the problem is paid search results, okay, where it's making 80% of all its money. And how does that get affected, with these leaps in AI? So maybe that model has to go through some radical shifts for monetization.
Well, I think it's really interesting as you're as you're on the front runner of helping people really get on that digital sales platform and looking at those fields, helping them transition this whole next market. I've seen a lot of people that are saying, "Hey, look, if we don't get if we don't take the products and digitize them, right, go back and really make it so that the AI platform, the Google search engines, the amount of data that's going to be required to be able to pick that product in the future, right?
Right.
Where is it made? How fast is it made? What does it take to get it? When are they going to be available? Really go back and look at the whole, back to raw products, the whole availability, product line, all of those aspects of it as it starts to really move into that next section. Being able to have it so that the AI model can see it. It won't be able to pick it without having that data. Today, you essentially put it on the web,
Yeah.
and Amazon, or depending on where you are in search engine optimization, it picks from it. But as it becomes more sort of where AI goes out and finds the perfect product for the perfect project and the perfect scenario that you're looking for, how does it pick it without the data that we need to do to feed that
Yeah.
AI model? So I think that's going to be an interesting little leap for the people that are out there selling products around the world. And
Yeah. But we also have to recognize, that search aspect, the typical funnel, top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, occurs at the bottom of funnel. Okay, that where that search aspect of it. Top of funnel, most people aren't in search mode. They are in either entertainment mode or information gathering mode, or some, not even that search mode or information gathering mode. But they're either mildly aware of that they have a pain or gain issue, or they are unaware completely that there could be a pain or gain issue coming. One of those kinds of things, right? And so I think I told you earlier about the opportunities for AI to really help marketers come up with different angles. And so there was an eco tourist company down in Australia that was a smaller organization, certainly not the clout of a Marriott or a Hilton or anything like that. They ran eco tours in Australia, and they wanted to open up new markets. And so they released an AI, they subscribed to an AI that went through all of their data and went through all the data possibilities as well, and discovered that there would be an eco-tourist opportunity for gay travel out of Scandinavian countries. Right. So,
right,
and who would have come up with that?
that's right.
So no one's searching for, this kind of thing. But now if we put that product in front, now we have a whole new marketplace to come to this eco travel opportunity in Australia, right? And that's something that would take tremendous amounts of human sifting through data to, if they ever came up with that inference, that realization at all that this market existed.
Well, I think there's the shift opportunity. Everybody's wondering what do I do now in preparation for this, right? As we start to really tell the story that, hey, look, this is your opportunity, right? It's never been a better time to have an opportunity than when we have a market shift, right? Every market shift we've ever had, any technological shift we've had, therein lies the opportunity. Now, the unfortunate part is you have to take it faster than ever before, right? Computers, you had 15 years or 20 years to get in there, and people are still doing something. But with AI models, this is going to happen even faster than those did. And now, the stories we got to help people through is, hey, look, now is your time to really engage and do this, right? Every team that's growing, every leader that's looking at their company, really, how do I start to embrace this and go down this path and look at it and go, all right, I could scare the crap out of my people. Look, this could be Terminator and a finger walking across the street, and the world's going to end. And yeah, I got that. And we should definitely protect ourselves through, some just look. It's time to put some safety stuff in there, and I believe that the world is starting to see that. I'm not sure how fast we'll be able to do that or how we'll do that, but the real story becomes as the opportunity that charismatic leader starts to look at it and go, all right, this is our opportunity to really create this option, right? To really exploit this opportunity, to really look at it and go, okay, this is our opportunity, as opposed to this is going to take us out of business. We should all put our heads in the sand and pray that we don't get blown up,
Yeah.
right?
Well, in a lot of ways, I see this. Well, let's put it this way: in 1800, the percentage of the U.S. population working in agriculture was about 60%.
Wow.
Okay, and with the advances in mechanization by 1900, that number had dropped to 42%. Today, it's less than 2% that work in agriculture. So what happened to this? So agriculture, became a lot more efficient, a lot more productive as a result. But that doesn't mean that fewer people are employed. So now they're employed in other industries. That's just what ended up happening. So, right now, the last stat I saw, there's like 2 million job vacancies in the US right now. 2 million, because people are retiring. How did that happen? You have a population of well over 310 million, something like that, right? Well, maybe 320. So 2 million job vacancies right now, especially in some very hard hit, labor constrained industries like, nursing, for example, right? Things that are not as easily replaceable by mechanization and such. But even with mechanization, that just made the farm as a whole more productive to serve society as a whole. In 1969, 1970, started the handheld calculator, a digital calculator, not electromechanical. By 1974, 75 came the spreadsheet. Now, the accountants could be quaking in their boots at that point in time, or did these advances just make them super productive? Super
That's right.
productive.
That's
And,
right. That's
on
right.
Wall Street finance could not take place without the high supercomputing abilities of their actual computers themselves, let alone the spreadsheets, let alone their ability then to use that data analysis and apply human insight and say, this is the direction the market's going. So you still need that human insight in there.
Just like you said, right? It still needs a human insight, and there always will be some level of creativity that we have. And here, will AI be able to do some things, most things better than we can? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there still will always be this part where this creative part of the unpredictable part of us, the part of us that it's really the part that we don't even understand today. A lot of us are still, there's that stuff we know. There's the stuff we know we don't know,
Yeah.
right? The stuff that, like, I get that I don't I'm not a brain surgeon. I don't get it. I know I don't do that.
Yeah.
But there's a whole group of stuff I don't know yet,
Yeah. That's
right?
the most dangerous.
And that's the most dangerous and the most opportunity also, right? That's also where possibility lives, right?
Yeah.
In danger and in possibility, I get both there. What I don't know, right, becomes the spot where I can create from. Now, you're right. It can also be a very dangerous spot to go through. But most of humankind, as we look through our development, has there been some places where we go negative or do some look, the nuclear power was definitely great. The A bomb was definitely one of those ones where, like, that could have been pretty bad. That could have gone really bad if everybody starts dropping those things. But someone realized, okay, we could, but that's probably not what all of our major countries have realized. We need to put a little bit of let's set that back a little bit, and let's make sure we're responsible, because ultimately we all need a planet to live on.
Yeah, exactly, right? And you're just poisoning one end of the aquarium. Eventually, they'll come
Right.
over onto
Right.
your side as well, right? It's just crazy stuff, right?
Uh,
Yeah,
and- and-
technology, this is, the second humankind discovered how to control fire.
Gotcha.
You discovered fire, humans, various migrations of humankind out of Africa in, 2 million years time, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Neanderthals. There's been 8 migrations. Homo sapiens, the word sapien, Yuval, your friend Yuval would tell you that sapien means wise, right? And they discovered how to control fire, how to start it, how to use it for warmth, how to use it for cooking purposes, that kind of thing. And so the second that they discovered fire, we were on the path to discovering atomic fission and the creation of the A bomb. That's just the inevitability of what happened.
Yeah. It's hard to see today where we're going. But if we could kind of have one little bit of trust and keep one eye open for the places where people we can't trust, right? There will be a couple of people who are malevolent, but overall, over a period of time, human beings have been. Now, I guess the concern most people are having is what happens when the AI is malevolent, right? Something that we don't control. That
Yeah.
becomes the part where you're like, well, I can see that one being,
And that's the Terminator situation, right?
right,
It becomes self-aware.
where it becomes self-aware, right? It starts to look at us as a resource, stealing its resources, and
or
now
a virus.
right,
They look at us as a virus, right? Yeah.
Right.
We're not there yet, so the ability to have consciousness is a huge leap away from anything that is available here. They can mimic consciousness. So it's the old Turing test.
Right.
And the Turing test has been around since what, the 40s, 50s, something like that. And so
Right.
am I talking to a real human being across that screen, or is it a machine? And so you can mimic a lot of things, but the idea that, it can be self-aware, a sentient being, and that it can have morals, or in this case, maybe no morals,
Right.
and it is only concerned with self-preservation. I think we're a huge leap from it. Those are chasms away.
The only concern I have is that we won't know, right? The concern I have is that as it develops, it's you and I have let's say 100-year lifespan. I mean, if we're
Yep.
really doing good at this,
Sure.
right? It doesn't. It doesn't matter if it's 100 years or 200 years from now. It takes its time, and it can be developing in the background and training itself and learning itself. It's not an egotistical driven deal such as a human becomes, and in there becomes that concern. So I think the understanding how to look at that stuff from the inside, I think it'll be fun for us to challenge ourselves to understand what it's actually training itself on. I just heard that ChatGPT was teaching itself chemistry, right?
That's
And
good.
that's a big one, right? Where it's sort of creating its own tests and backgrounds and its own AI started to teach itself chemistry.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a pretty big jump,
Are
right?
you a fan of science fiction?
I am.
Okay, so have you read the Dune series? Frank Herbert?
I watched the movie, but haven't read the book. I hear
Oh,
the
the
book's
books are
better.
great. The books
Yeah.
are absolutely great. I read them probably 30 years ago, the first 4 anyways. And in the books, Frank Herbert is a phenomenal writer, and layering one thing on top of the other, economics, resources, ecology, all these different types of things. And one of the things that was clear in his books was he had a what is it, series of events called I think it's called the Butlerian Jihad. The Butlerian Jihad, where they destroyed all the computational devices that mimic the mind of humans, the mind of mankind, right? And they destroyed them because it was causing way too much havoc. And so that's how you got the mentats instead. So it's all humans now that have the processing capability of computers. So he saw back in 1969 that there was going to be a problem with AI, and he had the Butlerian Jihad get rid of all of it.
It is going to be a fun little ride. I watch as you develop companies, and I'm so first of all, I'm gifted to have you on the show, and your wisdom and the work that you do. I just find your work to really inspire me, right? To grow better,
Thank
to
you.
grow better as a leader. I get excited to tell better stories and be able to find ways to really be charismatic with the people that I lead. When I got your book and I read through it, it really brightens up my thinking, right? It's one of those ones where And listeners, if you're on today, take a second right now, go on and pick up the book. It's the 7 essential stories charismatic leaders tell, right? Am I
It's
saying that
on
right?
Amazon.
On
Yep.
Amazon. It's easy to get. It's an easy read. It's pretty quick to read. I knocked it off in over a weekend, and I really enjoyed that.
Terrific.
Uh,
Thank you.
it's got some great stuff that you can bring into your sales meeting with, or into your leadership groups, or into your leadership. For me, I brought into our leadership group, and those 6 leaders now have that book and are enjoying that. And it's a great way to help your team grow. So if you got some time, grab Karen's book and look it up and read it. So it's a great read. So any last minute stuff you want to tell the audience that we can leave them inspired?
Well, the only way we understand our world is through the stories we tell ourselves. So we have to be very deliberate in the stories that we put out there. So the idea that you can just put a fact out there or remain silent. Nature and culture abhors a void. It abhors a vacuum. So people now come in and they make up their own stories. And those may not be the stories you want them to remember. Okay. You know how he created that business? It's all drug money. That's what it was. That's not true. Where did that come from? Right. But until you get in front of that creation story now and really understand that, as a way to convey that Genesis, the creation story to your people, they're going to make up their own little stories. And worse than that, if they don't make up their own stories, bad stories are bad stories. The story void means that you have no ability to inspire them with the creation story. So you want to be deliberate.
Great. That's so true, that when I don't have an answer about something, and it can be anything, I pull from a past story and fill in that void. And you're exactly right. When I fill in that void with a past story, it's not usually the best story, right?
It's
I don't know
not.
why. I don't know why what goes that way. It's not usually like, well, it created this with rainbows and unicorns. It's usually it's drug money idea, right? It's usually the opposite, some sort of bad idea. So you're right on with that, and I think that's a great way to put that. If leaders aren't creating charismatic stories for their people to understand the genesis of their organizations, the ideas that they want to create, the execution of the plan that they have, our people will fill those in with something negative,
with their own thing. And I guarantee that, if they've been with you a while, if they are not engaged with the story, they're not engaged with your organization.
That's awesome.
Right. The more they're engaged with the story, the more engaged they are with the organization. That's just what it is, because they find meaning and purpose in their participation. That's what it is. So you have to be deliberate about the stories that you put out there. And if I go to, the average leader and I ask them, what is that big idea that brings everything that we do here together? They're going to give me, a little fluffy answer. The vast majority of people will give a fluffy answer. And it can't be about, we're here to make money. It can't be about that, right? If we talk about, the enemy we face, what are we fighting for? What are we fighting against? They might have an old answer, but what's the new answer? Because your enemies change over time. So this idea of continually painting a vision forward, okay, with transforming enemies, transforming opportunities, transforming rewards for the people involved, right? And then continually, it's a constant sail into uncharted waters. No one knows what that water looks like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The only thing you can do is have a well-resourced ship of committed people. And the way you get commitment out of people is with powerful stories.
You are a powerful leader. You are charismatic and addictive. I just hanging out with you, I'm addicted. I could spend all day with you. Every time you have a new book coming out, every time you guys make some new headway, I'd love to have you back. I beg to have you back. Your charisma is really contagious. Corinne, I just love having you on the show, and I'm grateful for having you here. I wish you and your group much luck. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to get a hold of you?
Well, the very first thing you should do is go to Amazon and download a copy of the Kindle book. $3.49 for that. It's really inexpensive. But if you want to catch up with me, come to strategypeak.com. Strategy is in Mountain Peak, strategypeak.com. And you can actually download a couple of chapters of the book there, plus an infographic that gives you all 7 stories with examples.
It's awesome. And audience, I'll put links to that down below. Connor and our team will make sure that we have all kinds of great links down there for the book and all that. So thanks for being on the show. And as always, audience, if you could just take a second right now and just like and subscribe, it means the world to both of us. And having that out there just lets us know. And if you have any questions or any comments, please let them put them down below. We answer every single one of them, and I'm grateful for you all listening today. Thanks for being here.